Folks, we're now joined by one of the best out there. Everybody looks up to him. You know him, you love him. You've seen him on Dan Patrick. You've seen him on Rich Eisen. You've seen him everywhere, but all of his great content can be found at Sports Illustrated and the MMQB. Obviously, we're talking about Albert Breer. Albert, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
You got it. Happy to be here, guys. Happy to be here, Gilberto.
Albert, I'm glad we got you on. You're a busy man.
Yeah.
But it's been, what, 5, 6 days?
This is my sixth day here
in Las Vegas.
Yeah, which is way too long to spend in Vegas under any circumstance, but Super Bowl week's always a long one.
Well, they say it's 40 hours and you go home and you got 6 days. But
yeah, you guys have, so where you guys live, you have way more access to it than I do, which is probably a good thing.
But being from the East Coast and then being here, and then but also covering the NFL for so long and seeing the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, a little surreal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's, you think back to being on a lot of press conferences with the commissioner where he was almost defiant about the idea of sports gaming and everything that went into it. And, I was covering the league when they went through the whole thing with fantasy, and they went through the whole thing with daily fantasy and FanDuel and DraftKings. And is this the same as that? So I can remember it being like, well, daily fantasy isn't the same thing as gambling, and fantasy football isn't the same thing as gambling. And I think everybody with like a brain in their head could figure out, like, if anybody ever breaks a seal on all of this, then they're going to be the first in line to go and monetize it. And I think it's interesting because you look at how a specific owner bought his team at a specific time because of what he thought gambling would do to the team valuations. That's David Tepper. He bought his team for, I think it was $2.275 billion in 2018. The Commanders just went for over $6 billion. So it's a different world. I like one thing that's a good rule of thumb. Gilberto, you can take this with you, put it in your back pocket.
Okay.
When I was young covering the league, somebody told me, whatever you do, follow the money. I will never underestimate the owner's greed.
That's very true. I completely agree. Albert, just what is one of your takeaways from Sunday? What is something that you're specifically looking for on Sunday, or a storyline to follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the obvious, which is like what this means for Patrick Mahomes' legacy potentially. If he were to win, that's 3 in 5 years. That's 3 at 28 years old. And I think, we all sort of had it in our head when Tom won his 7th, even when he won his 5th and his 6th, it's going to be a long time before someone can challenge that. And the number seems so out there. And so that there's a guy that was in the league with him for 6 years that's positioned now to challenge it is pretty wild. So that's the first thing, I think. And then, I had somebody say, and I don't know if I totally buy this, but I did have one scout say, this is David versus Goliath in 2 ways. David versus Goliath at quarterback, and David versus Goliath everywhere else. And so it's sort of, a test of different team builds. The Chiefs, because they've got a big, expensive quarterback contract on their books, are very young in a lot of spots, and they've drafted well, but they're relying on a lot of young players in key spots. The Niners have a galaxy of stars, star players everywhere you look. And so it's almost like 2 ways of building your team kind of going up against one another. So that's the other thing. And, you think back to, Super Bowl 54 when these teams played before, and it almost crystallized what Mahomes can be, which is like the ultimate eraser. It's what Brady always was. You remember the Seattle Super Bowl where the Seahawks just pounded them for 2.5 quarters, and somehow he's able to put his foot in the ground and turn them, and off they go and they win the game. And it was the same thing with Mahomes against the Niners. I mean, 3.5 quarters, the Niners controlled that thing. And, if Jimmy Garoppolo gets that ball to Emmanuel Sanders, maybe that game's over. Nick Bosa's the MVP. And, so I think the psychology of this game is going to be really interesting. Like, if the Niners do control the pace for 2.5, 3 quarters, what's in their head if they're up 10 or 14 going into the fourth quarter? I think it's a really interesting dynamic.
That would have been interesting. A rookie, Nick Bosa, winning the Super Bowl MVP.
And he would have been. I mean, I think if you watched the first 3 quarters of that game, I mean, and it was, and you could even argue that 3rd and 15 play, right, to Tyreek Hill, like, he was held on that play. You know what I mean? Like,
but I'm crazy. But I'm crazy when I say that. Look at that.
Yeah. So
Albert, going off on Nick Bosa, it feels for his standards, his play was a little I guess lower than expectations.
This year, you mean?
This year, yeah. And he got paid all that money, but he really stepped up in the postseason. Yep. 2 sacks against the Lions. That defensive front with Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave, they got Chase Young. I guess, what you've been hearing, how do people feel about that front so far?
That's a big-time storyline. They have not played to the level everybody thought they would. When you look at the raw ability, and again, you name the names, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, obviously bring in Chase Young. They have, Nick Bosa, who was the reigning defensive player of the year coming into the season. And, you expect that that's going to be like, whatever, the great defensive lines, the 2007 Giants, the great Ravens fronts, like you think it's going to be another one of those. They haven't quite been that. And so that's another interesting thing to watch on Sunday, because the Chiefs have been up and down at tackle. Like, their 2 new tackles, Juwan Taylor, Donovan Smith, are good, but they've had some ups and downs through this year, and Joe Thuney's probably not going to play. So you sort of start to add that up, and that could wind up being one of the more pivotal things one of the more pivotal matchups in the game.
Fran, let me get one more 49ers question. But if they don't win the Super Bowl, do you expect a lot of changes? Brandon Ayuk needs to get paid. Yeah. Do they go for a Kirk Cousins and Brock Purdy can't get it done?
I think, no, I don't think there'll be massive changes, but I think you can look at the makeup of their roster. And, I mean, they're going to have to pay the piper at some point. So this is an amazing fact. Every year I do like this roster breakdown of the 4 conference finalists, just to kind of examine the way that they're built and how they're put together, maybe the different philosophies and how you do it. And so what I do is I'll categorize homegrown, and then players that were signed in free agency, players that came by a trade, players on waivers, all of that. And then last 5 first-round picks and top 5 cap numbers. And the Niners' biggest cap number this year, it's amazing, was $12.5 million. They have 9 guys on their roster making over $14 million a year. That tells you how they are pushing money into the future. And eventually that catches up with you. So next year, without restructuring, they're going to have a huge cap problem. So is this where they start to offload guys, or do they kick the can down the road another year? I don't think as long as Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are there, you can talk about windows closing on the whole operation. But I would say it's fair to say that this particular core group of players doesn't have an infinite amount of shots left.
Albert, there's been a lot of rumors about, hey, if they win, Andy Reid could be on his way. He could retire.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce and Jason may want to go out at the same time, and just stuff like that. Like, what do you think of it? Do you think if they do win, any major changes could be coming to Kansas City, or do you feel like Andy Reid might do what some players say, and until the wheels fall off, literally, they may go?
I think Kelce to me is the one where I look at him, and I could see him walking away. He's older. He got beat up this year. He's obviously got a thriving social life. But somebody asked me that question the other day, like, who do you think is more likely to walk, Kelce or Reid? And I said Kelce. With Reid, I'd say there are 2 things that I've really kind of honed in on when I'm answering this question, which is, like, number one, I had somebody there who's pretty high up say, it doesn't matter how early you get to the building or how late you leave, Andy's car is there. There's a way of saying, like, his passion for the job has gone nowhere, right? Like, this is a guy who still loves to do it. The other part is he has Patrick Mahomes. And if you really love the job and you know how this is all going to affect your legacy and you're comfortable where you are and you have the thing wired a certain way where you probably, like, I'm not saying it's turnkey, but there are probably a lot of things that are a lot easier than they were when you were first setting it up. And you have the quarterback who's going to keep you in it almost regardless of what else you have out there year to year. I mean, I can't find anybody who thinks he's walking after this year.
Fernando, I wanted to ask Albert about Taylor Swift. One question about Taylor Swift.
But I would say, the one thing I would add there, too, well, just real quick, guys.
No, go ahead, yeah.
I do think, because I want to be clear about this, I do think he's going to take a week or two to decompress. Like, I think that's something I have heard, that, like, he takes a week, 2 weeks to kind of reset, which I think is a smart thing to do, because you separate yourself from the fatigue, the emotion, all of that of the season.
Sorry.
You're good.
He just looked really tired to me in the AFC Championship and some of these places.
Yeah.
I've kind of noticed him, but at the same time, like you said, you take 2 weeks off, you get away from, oh my God, we just won our Super Bowl, or we just lost it.
Yeah.
And you kind of get your mind right and say, can my body still do this? Can I still do this?
And I think that's part of it. And yeah, it's interesting too, because I think these were all sort of like, we all looked at these as kind of like hypotheticals, but then, this year, Pete Carroll and Nick Saban walk away, and Bill gets fired and can't find a job, and I think it's I understand why people are asking the question, definitely.
And Albert, I try not to give you a silly question about Taylor Swift, but you mentioned follow the money.
I'm fine with that. You can play grab ass if you want. I'm good with it.
No, it's more like you mentioned follow the money for like league owners in the NFL. Are they enjoying this?
Oh yeah. I mean, I actually thought at the beginning I was like, I thought it was fake at the beginning. I'll admit that now, because I thought like it was like, I was like, this totally sounds like what like some like 50-year-old executive would say in a meeting in a boardroom in June. What's really hot now, guys, is this Eras tour. I took my 2 daughters to it, and like, wow, they love it. And so is there any way that we can get in on this? So I was like, there's part of me that was like, this is going, like this feels too convenient. But I don't think you'd be able to carry it on the way that they've carried it on to this point. And I actually got to see it up close 2 Sundays ago. I was right next to them. And I walked onto the field right next to her. And, my wife was super jealous of the video of it, too.
Did you send her a video?
Oh, yeah. She's like, okay, so you told her to shoot a video saying, what's up? That's really cool of you. So, like, nah, I didn't stop her. I mean, it's obviously, I always tell people, like, people who complain and bitch and moan about this stuff, right? And I don't think anybody, how is anybody that pissed off about 3-second cutaways? Like, who cares? This is like the guy who, follows the indie band who gets all pissed off when he goes mainstream. But, I think, one thing you have to remember, like all of us, I'm sure you guys are this way, but I've followed football since I can remember, and my fall weekends have revolved around football since I can remember, way before I was doing this for a living and when I played and all that different stuff. And they don't really care that much about us. They have us.
Yeah.
Like, they don't need to do extra stuff to get us to sit there on Sunday at 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 8 o'clock, or I guess your guys' time, 10, 1, and 5, right?
Yeah.
They don't need to do anything. Who they're after is that fan. Who they're after is that person who might be on the fence, could watch, might not watch. Like, you give them a little something extra to watch, and I think that's where it's a good business proposition for the league.
Records will be broken this weekend for sure when it comes to... She makes it back from Tokyo, which I'm sure Albert's going to have to be on plane watch duty.
Like flight tracker or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, actually, don't do that. I think she's suing.
I heard there was something. Is that right?
I think she's suing. She's thinking about suing the college student that's doing it. So.
Well, but that's hilarious because like college coaches have these things, and like Dan Snyder, there was the Dan Snyder flight tracker Twitter account, I think. So like this isn't new.
Yeah.
Like. This has existed in our business forever. Like, I trust me. I've spent time in my career tracking down like tail numbers, like owners' tail numbers.
And not just like remember when Kawhi Leonard was thinking about making his free agency move in 2017, and then Shohei Ohtani. People track flight numbers. I mean, that's just the thing. Albert, real quick. Jim Harbaugh going to the Chargers.
Yep.
Just your thought. I know in the past. Dean Spanos is cheap. Dean Spanos is this. They're not serious about winning. Does this kind of change a lot of sentiment when it comes to that of what they've said about him in the past?
I mean that was I think that was like one of the reasons why it worked at the level that it worked was because the two things that really they're sensitive about there, and you guys can speak to the second part better than me, but A, they're cheap, and B, they're irrelevant in LA. Like, right? Like, and this addresses both those things because they had to pay to get him. They had to pay to surround him with the people it was going to take to get him. And, like, I think this gives them a shot to be relevant in LA. Where they haven't been that, right? Like, so.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, Herbert's kind of helped them in a bit with it, but
it's a long way to go.
Yeah,
but I mean, like, where do they rank? You know what I mean?
Well,
if you ranked all the teams in every sport, where do they rank?
Dodgers, Lakers, USC football,
Rams, right?
and then maybe Chargers.
Raiders.
No.
Raiders.
I think the Raiders I would put in the top 3 actually.
I've heard the Raiders are more popular.
No, 100%. But I'd probably put them
USC?
7.
Yeah, USC football. For
USC's got to be ahead of them, right?
Yeah.
UCLA basketball is probably in there somewhere.
Maybe.
I don't know
sometime.
about USC football though, just because. They've still been pretty bad. I mean, they've sold, but you're right though.
But I mean, just as far as like relevance and what people care about.
100%. I know. I agree with you. They're probably 7th on the totem pole, but Jim Harbaugh must elevate.
Chargers above the Ducks.
Yeah, I'll say yeah.
Well, because they're in Anaheim, so but yeah, I think so.
But I think it's a good way. It's a good way to move the needle. You know what I mean? Like, and if you're looking to build a new fan base. You have the quarterback. I think Jim's a phenomenal football coach. And the one thing that's amazing about him is it looks exactly the same no matter where he goes. It looked the same at San Diego, at Stanford, at the Niners, and at Michigan. And there's a brand of football that he'll bring there. And, I mean, I think I look at him as a little bit like Bill Parcells. Like, he's going to come in and shake your program up. Might burn some people out, but he's going to shake your program up. He's going to engender great loyalty from the people that buy in, and you're probably going to win really quick.
And Albert, before we let you go, got to get you at least one Ohio State question.
Yeah.
Whoa! Before you do that, OH.
I-O.
There you go.
There you go. Okay,
now I'm glad you guys know that.
Sorry about that, but I did see.
How about that?
I saw C.J. Stroud walking around. I guess for you, you're working in the NFL, but you're also a fan and an alumni. You went there. But to see the season that C.J. Stroud had and to finally get a quarterback that's doing well in the NFL, I know Justin Fields up and down, but C.J. is definitely a guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good to see because I know how much the people there love him. I have really good relationships with a lot of people in Columbus. That work in and around the football program, and I think what's cool about it is like everybody says he's an A+ kid, and I think the hope was. So he had like a little bit of an up and down last year there, and there were these questions. And that Georgia game, the game he played where they almost pulled it out and beat a really, really good Georgia team that won the national title. I remember talking to people before the draft last year. It's like, if that's what we're getting, then we really got something. But it was one game. And so I think that was like what was kind of hard for NFL teams to wrap their head around. It's like, a bunch of different factors can make for a night like that. And so are you willing to gamble that that's going to be who he is in the context of 17-game seasons over and over and over and over again? And it was funny because I was talking to one of those guys yesterday about it. And like, they were like, well, yeah, like the tape was the tape. And, and he said, It's like the last piece of tape is playing over and over and over again now, and so it does seem like that switch flipped. And like I said, like he's a great kid, and I think I'm happy. It's great to see it because I know how many people in Columbus are happy to see it.
Is there any? Do you think last one for us? And we appreciate your time.
Yep.
Ryan Day, because of everything going on right now, do you feel like he kind of is on the hot seat a little bit?
They have to win, yeah. I mean, they know it. Like they have to beat Michigan, preferably by a lot, and like win the Big Ten and compete for a national championship. And I don't know if it's national title or bust, but they have to be in that mix, no question. I mean, they have 8 kids coming back who were draft eligible who would have gone in the top 100 picks, and I don't know if there's a precedent for that anywhere. I mean, so you take the guard, Donovan Jackson, the receiver, Emeka Egbuka, the running back, Travion Henderson, the 3 defensive linemen, Tyleik Williams, Jack Sawyer, and JT Tuimoloau, And then the two corners, Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke, all 8 of those guys were draft eligible and would go in the top 100 picks. You bring in the quarterback from Kansas State, Will Howard. You bring in the safety from Alabama, Caleb Downs. I think a very strong statement was made that the Yankees of college athletics are going to start to act like the Yankees of college athletics, and that turns up the temperature on everybody. And I'll tell you what else, what will keep it there all year is if Mike Vrabel's not working and he's just sitting out there, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on a lot of people. But I think that they would tell you that they embrace it.
Well, folks, that was the great Albert Breer. Albert, thank you so much for jumping on with us. Don't forget to check out everything on his social media and on the MMQB.com. Albert, thank you so much for jumping on.
You got it, guys.